Whittier Homestead is one of the oldest buildings built in America and is actually older than the country it's in by a century. It was built by Thomas B. Whittier, great 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 grandfather of the world famous poet John Greenleaf, who originally came over to America as an indentured servant. When he was finally granted pardon from his servitude, he traveled to the city of Haverhill and built this historic house in 1688. He then bought many acres of land and started a farm that would be in the Whittier family for the next 200 years. Then, on December 17th, 1807, John Greenleaf Whittier was born, and the legacy of his poetry and his struggle for freedom of the slaves began. Whittier's first published piece, "The Exile's Departure," was first published in the Haverhill Gazette when he was 18 years old. It was published by William Lloyd Garrison, who would later on become Whittier's mentor and a colleague in the battle for abolition. After a few years at the prestigious Haverhill Academy, Whittier joined Garrison's abolitionist movement. In 1833, he was on the National Anti-Slavery Convention in Philadelphia. The next year, he would take a position as one of the paid secretaries of the Anti-Slavery Society and was made a publicist for it. In 1836, he would also become editor of the Essex Gazette, and later that year he was made managing editor when the owner, Aratus Brooks, sold the Gazette to Whittier's brother-in-law, Jacob Cladwell. He then used his influence over the press to write radical anti-slavery sheets. In 1837, Whittier, with his father being deceased in 1830, sold his family's farm and bought a house for his mother and himself in Amesbury, Massachusetts. This house would also become used as a safe house for slaves escaping from the South by passage of the Underground Railroad. Whittier's new home was a sanctuary for those who sought freedom in Canada. In 1840, Whittier was forced to resign from his position in the Anti-Slavery Society when a rift began to emerge within. Garrison and his followers believed that they should be more aggressive and take action, even if it meant a split in the United States. Whittier, however, disagreed and still believed that they could end slavery and preserve the Union if they remained patient. Since Garrison controlled the society, Whittier was forced to reluctantly quit. Afterwards, Whittier still fought for the freedom of slaves and would use whatever influence he could to see that the Union remained and the slaves be freed. In 1864, John C. Fremont, the opposing politician of Abraham Lincoln in the election, dropped out of the race after receiving a letter by Whittier, thanking Fremont for his service, but saying it's time to step back and rest easy, knowing Abe's got it from here. Whittier was also on the Electoral College and cast his vote for Abraham Lincoln in both 1860 and 1864. After the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865, Whittier turned his attention to his real passion, poetry. Whittier was already a well-known political poet, so he had no trouble getting other poems to be published and sold for him. He wrote many poems in his time, including works such as The Barefoot Boy and In School Days. His masterpiece, Snowbound, was published in 1865, and that is what gave Whittier his real fame as an artist. It sold all over the world, and all of a sudden Whittier was the equivalent to a modern-day rock star. Everyone wanted to meet him, and they came from everywhere to get a chance to meet their favorite poet. Among these admirers were Harriet Beecher Stowe, Louisa May Alcott, and Emily Dickinson, all of whom were inspired by Whittier to write and fight for their rights during women's suffrage movements. Whittier was a humble man and a Quaker, so he didn't care much for the large crowds or the amounts of money he received. He donated a lot of his profits from his poems to Quaker houses, charities for the sick and disabled, African American citizens, and anyone considered being an underdog. To avoid the large crowds of people, Whittier would move around a lot, from Amesbury to Marblehead to Haverhill to Lake Ossipee, and any place in between, just anywhere where he could find some privacy. He'd never be able to find it, though. Practically everyone wanted to meet the poet, have dinner with the poet, things like that. Not only that, but the people would actually build towns around him. First, a couple of taverns and places to stay. Then some travelers would start to live in the cities. Small businesses would begin to thrive, and all of a sudden, what was a small town would become a bustling and busy city, all because Whittier lived there, and the people wanted to be near him. Whittier died September 6th, 1892, and was buried in the Amesbury Cemetery. It was one of the largest recorded funerals in history, all in attendance gathering to honor the life of a poet who influenced them. The reason why this site is important to our understanding of American history is because it gives us an idea of how Whittier had a political, social, and economic impact on the development of the country. As a poet and a writer, he used his influence to sway crowds into the abolitionist movement, which led to the emancipation of the African American slaves. He used his writings to impact the world of politics. If he hadn't written to Fremont, there would be a possibility that Lincoln would never have been president in 1864, and things would have been dramatically different, Civil War era US. His poems affected the economic development of America as well. His fans would follow him anywhere he went, and they would literally build cities around him, putting the cities we know today on the map. The works of this individual helped with the development of not only the Essex County, but the whole country, and that is why the Whittier homestead is an important site in American history.